What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Bill Mahari here, represent Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune into Basketball Conversations every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. So let's get down to business here, shall we? We're about 4 days away from the date of January 26th. This was a year removed from the death of Kobe Bryant. But today is the 15th anniversary of when Kobe Bryant scored 81 points against the Toronto Raptors, the second highest scoring total in NBA history. Um, Nobody had even achieved scoring 81 points for almost what? Since when Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in basically in 1962. It's been about 4 or 5 decades, about at least between the 60s to the mid 2000s, nearly about 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, nearly 5.5 decades since anyone had even eclipsed beyond 70 points. David Thompson, scored 71 points in the mid 70s to basically win the scoring title against George Gervin. But up until then, no one has scored more than beyond 70 points up during that period of time. But the big news that came, the big thing that really separated from that huge game was how Kobe Bryant was able to score all of those points. In that game, they were facing against the Toronto Raptors, and the Lakers were 22-19. The Raptors were 14-27. During that game, the Lakers were down in this game. They were basically behind by as many as 14 points, and Kobe Bryant was pretty much, scored 14 points in the first quarter, and then ultimately in the second quarter, Kobe scored at least 12 points. And at the half, the Lakers were down by 14, and Kobe had scored 26 in the first half, which was a phenomenal half by all standards for any other player. And I remember watching that game from the highlights when I was a kid and thinking to myself that, Kobe's going to have one of those another great nights of, scoring 30 or 40 points. I mean, that was pretty much what's the given norm, because pretty much by that time, this was 2 years after the Lakers traded Shaquille O'Neal to the Miami Heat. And this was about 2.5 years removed from the infamous, Eagle, Colorado arrest involving that sexual assault scandal that really damaged his reputation for a little while. And by that time, Kobe was pretty much the solo act of the team, and he was pretty much the main go-to guy for the Lakers. And it was pretty much during that period of time where where Phil Jackson, finally came back to coaching after spending a year off, and then pretty much by that time, the Lakers were still on the cusp of trying to get to the postseason, but they're pretty much their postseason aspiration was a little bit dim early on in the season. But back to the game here. By that stretch, Kobe and his Lakers were down by 14. But then in the third quarter of play, Kobe just went off. He went off by scoring at least 27 in the third quarter. He was 11 of 15. He was shooting 4 or 5 from 3-point range and only took one free throw. And I remembered something that Sam Mitchell talked about, because he was the head coach of the Raptors at the time. He was talking. He would pretty much in the media. They were asking him about why he didn't double, triple team him or anything like that. And he pretty much said with a straight face, like, look, we tried everything. We tried double teaming him. We tried triple teaming him. I mean, he was making crazy shots. Compared to the difference between, when Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points, pretty much he was a center. And pretty much throughout the whole game, his teammates basically fed him the ball on the inside in a blowout win against the New York Knicks, where he had loads of opportunities to score 100 points. Whereas with Kobe he was doing it by creating his own shot from the outside. And he was pretty much creating his own shot by drawing contact, taking tough contested shots over double teams, over single coverage. I mean, he was taking difficult shots in the book. And he was hitting nearly every shot from the angle. Then as you head into the fourth quarter, he was pretty much nearing towards the 81 point total. Remember, he pretty much finished the first half scoring 26. All right, he scored 26, but then he came back, scored 26, pretty much doubled that by scoring 28 in the third quarter. So after 3 quarters of play, I make sure I calculate my numbers correctly. By that stretch, he pretty much had he pretty much scored at least, as I make sure I do my calculations correctly. He scored 53 in 3 quarters. That's really a great game. I'll tell you this: if anyone scored 53 points in 3 quarters of play, I'm gonna tell you something. That's a great game in of itself, right? But no, he was not done yet. Mm-mm-mm-mm. He kept putting on the points. He scored 28 in the fourth quarter, getting to the free throw line, and pretty much getting 12 free throw attempts. That's how he was able to score his 81 points. And then I'm watching this on Sports Center because then it was in the middle. I think it was in the middle of a NBA game. I'm not sure which one it was, but then they made him cut to the game and they cut to the Lakers game. Then as Kobe Bryant was taking his second steps from the free throw line, he had pretty much set 79 points. Then he drilled his last 2 free throws, as you see in the picture there, to eclipse 81 points. By that stretch, when this game was over with, it was a huge standing ovation inside Staples Center. And when Mike Tanter, the announcer, pretty much said that Kobe Bryant's 81 points is the second highest scoring total game in NBA history, it was pandemonium. In addition to breaking the previous franchise record of 71 set by Elgin Baylor, like he said, Kobe Bryant's 81 points was the second highest scoring point total in NBA history, surpassed only by Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game in 1962. Okay, Chamberlain was pretty much playing in an era where it was pace, faster scoring, and opportunities were pretty much plentiful, and he accounted pretty much for 59% of his team's points in that win against the Knicks, compared to Kobe's 66% of the Lakers scoring when they scored 122 points. And pretty much in that same month, Kobe became the first player since 1964 to score 45 points or more in 4 consecutive games, joining Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor as the only players in NBA history to accomplish that feat. And for that whole month of January, Kobe Bryant averaged 43.4 points per game. That was pretty much to this date the 8th highest scoring total month in NBA history and the highest for any other player than Wilt Chamberlain. Pretty much by the time that season came to an end, Kobe Bryant pretty much set single-season franchise records for the most 40-point games with 27 and the most points scored with about 2,832 points. He pretty much won the scoring title for the first time by scoring at least 35.5 points per game, becoming the 5th player in league history to average at least 35 in a season. But the worst part is that he only finished 4th in MVP behind Steve Nash. Okay, and he only received 22 first place votes, because you got to remember, this was at a time when Kobe Bryant's reputation was still a little bit tarnished by the sexual assault scandal, which to this day is absolutely bogus. All right, I'm not going to get into that, but for Kobe Bryant to pretty much carry that team of all the flaws they had and literally carry them to the playoffs and be up 3-1 against the Phoenix Suns, led by their eventual MVP, Steve Nash, is an accomplishment in of itself. Remember, that team, if you take away Kobe Bryant away from that team, all right, they don't make the playoffs. That's just the facts. They don't make the playoffs, and they probably end up being a lottery team at best. All right? Kobe Bryant's 81 points is still, to this day, one of the greatest scoring games in NBA history, and something that many players I don't think will ever do for pretty much a long time. All right, I bet you by the time I get older, maybe somebody will pretty much eclipse the 70 point mark. But for Kobe to score 81 points in that particular era, where the defense was still partially good, but not as fierce as it was back in those days, is an unbelievable accomplishment. All right. I've seen people try to compare LeBron James' 61 points to compare to Kobe's 81. I mean, listen, with no disrespect to LeBron James. But if I had to choose between those two performances, I'm taking Kobe Bryant's performance of that night over LeBron's. No disrespect. Because of not only just the significance of how that game was played, but remember, as I said, they were behind by as many as 14 points against the Raptors. And literally, Kobe Bryant put the team on his back to not only win the game, but also to score those 81 points, pretty much literally, by taking all sorts of crazy shots. All right? It's a big difference because remember, when Will Chamberlain scored those 81, scored the 100 points, they basically fed him the basketball as a big man. All right? He had plenty of opportunities to score inside. Kobe, as a guard, like I said, he had to create his own shot. He had to literally create a shot off the dribble, off of screens, off of pick and rolls, all right? And had to create contact to get to the free throw line. That's not easy to do. And I think one of the big things that I think Kobe Bryant remembers from is that he kind of regrets the fact that he missed a couple of those key shots because he believed that night he had the opportunity to pass Will Chamberlain for 100 points. When you look at the final stat total of that game, he shot 28 for 46 from the field, which is 60%. He shot 7 of 13 from three-point range, got to the free throw line 20 times, and made 18 of them. I will tell you this. I think Kobe Bryant has a good, legitimate argument that if he would have made at least maybe 35 to 36 shots of those 46 that he took, I think he has a strong argument that he would have easily surpassed Will Chamberlain for those 100 points. It's still to this day a record that still has not been broken. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think it will ever be broken. You know what I'm saying? Based on how the game is being played at this particular point and how the game has pretty much changed over time, I don't think that anyone's going to eclipse 100 points. And I sure as hell don't think anyone's going to ever eclipse the 81 that Kobe Bryant set. You know? But that night, it was pretty much the closest that we would have saw to seeing somebody actually attempt to break Will Chamberlain's 100-point record. And it was a phenomenal performance, to say the least. So as we celebrate, that anniversary of that great performance, and as we're counting down the final 4 days towards January 26th, when ultimately he and his daughter, along with those passengers that died in that helicopter crash, I just wanted to give you guys some context from my perspective about one of the greatest, scoring performances in NBA history, and no doubt about it that a scoring performance we probably will never see again, for a very long time. And so, as I end this video, I just want to give a tribute to Kobe Bryant, to his daughter, and those other passengers that died in that helicopter crash on January 26th, 2020. Your memories and everything that you stood for in basketball will never be forgotten, and the memories that you've created are going to last, pretty much a lifetime. So that's just my 2 cents. RIP to those people, including Kobe and his daughter, Gianna. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. And with that, I'm out. Peace.